The First Punic War, not to get into too deep of a history lesson on this, this was the first main battle between Rome and Carthage. This was not with Hannibal, that was the second war. This dealt with his father, Hamilcar Barca. And specifically, this final battle was centered around an effort to relieve Hamilcar Barca, who was trapped on Mount Eryx. The Carthaginians had a nice plan to bring the ships over, loaded with goods and troops, to try to save him. The Romans got wind of it. Intelligence, always an asset in war. And they had it and went in and had an old-fashioned ambush. Attacked the ships. The Carthaginian ships were loaded with supplies. The Roman ships were bristling, ready for war, and it was a very one-sided outcome, according to the historical sources. Or was it, according to the archaeological finds? We're still determining that as we go. The project kicked off in this area. We knew from historical sources, Polybius mainly, that around where this area was. But in the early 2000s, there was some material that came out of the sea, including a warship ram that was found in a dentist office. As so many things pulled up by fishermen usually are, they make their way through private collections. A helmet, and this got turned over to the superintendent's office. And then a while later, myself, my partner, and my good friend and co-director, Sebastiano Tusa, who represents the Soprintendenza del Mare de Sicilia, who is our formal partner in this, and we concocted a project in 2005 began, and are in our 10th year of investigating this site. There's many partners that go into this. When you have a lot of technology and you're working in waters where this site is, 85 to 100 meters of depth, not using divers, you end up with a lot of partners coming in, a lot of institutions to try to help you. Looking at the project itself, one of the things we initiated was a multi-beam survey, and you can see it highlighted here. The map around the islands, that's a little over 215 square kilometers. This was to give a baseline bathymetric map, which helps a lot when you're attempting to search an area and then put your vehicles over that, put maps over that, put distribution of artifact plots over such a map. And early on, we did find a ram from this badly damaged, moved ram that we had, very torn up. The problem was it was far from the battle site. We didn't know that yet, and it ate up a couple of years searching around this where we found nothing. You can see here where we actually, in sector PWA, we did eventually, in 2010, run into where the battle site was located. And from that, we were able to begin to recover a tremendous amount of material spread over a large area that includes, and this is just some of the major finds. There's amphoras clearly everywhere. There's small finds, but the helmets and the rams, some of the main objects. Here's an idea of how they're found on the sea, how they're discovered in situ. These are usually either sitting upright or at a slight angle, excuse me, and you notice the burial isn't that great. Your athlete around here was buried, entirely buried, and it was discovered when a storm moves a little sand away. This is offshore. This is offshore another 22 kilometers from mainland Sicily, so you don't have the sediment accumulation out in these depths that you normally do. Good and bad is everything. We can find them very easily. You don't have to wait for a storm to move the sediment. Bad is because the tornado and the organisms come and eat up all the things like wood and organic material that would be great to find. You can see the helmets as well. Helmets are out easily to find, sitting on the seafloor after 2,200 years. Still kind of boggles the mind sometimes to see these. One of the things I always show in this middle slide in the top center is, and you'll see some of the equipment later, similar ROVs, AUVs, expensive research vessel, $1 million ROV. The device we use in high-tech scientific technology and deep sea work to pick up the helmets is a mop handle wrapped with duct tape and stuffed with sponges, because it's so easy to slide in there. It makes like a big boxing fist you can put right in the helmet, and the ROV can pick it up. So as an archaeologist, you tend to, we are notorious for putting things together with string and tape to try to do things. And even with this high tech, there's still a lot of that going on in archaeology. You see some of the amphoras that are lying around too. These are also on the surface. These are widely scattered. I think most people, especially here, are familiar with amphora sites, amphora wrecks. And these are usually nice piles of amphoras. You can see a wreck site, and it's classic. You see these on TVs, they're always represented. None of these amphoras are near each other. In a room this size, you may have 20 or 30 scattered out, in different distances from each other. We'll see later why that takes place. Now, what are our archaeological objectives, and how does this relate to the technology, especially for this conference that we're looking at? The initial survey, that's the baseline map we need in order to understand the environment for which we're searching. Mapping and recording. Now we get into the remote sensing aspect, where we're trying to determine artifact distribution or record in situ the objects themselves so that we have the information of how they're oriented, how they're found, that aids us in our study. And then afterwards is monitoring. Not everything is always raised, especially raised right after its discovery, and in some countries it may be decades before it's raised. This, for example, is an amphora wreck, classic one, in Albania. Now, this probably won't be raised for decades, but it still needs to be, you have to monitor, you have to revisit these, and there's certain systems that are growing in the technology fields that assist us with this. Our objectives in archaeology still remain the same outside of the technology. We research, we publish, museum displays, you put it on for the public outreach and education. This is really the end point that we're trying to get to. The technology is the interface for us to work in the sites, and more so to reach some of these objectives with a lot of 3D modeling and other things that have taken place in recent years. It's another way to present this to the public, to educate with the material. And how do we go about these objectives with technology? Here's one of our ROVs. It's not our ROV. We leased the ROV this year, investigating the waters. It's one of the new systems. And this is probably, show this very plain slide, in that this is the way forward for many of the systems. Years and years, decades, we have been dragging stuff behind boats, dragging sonars, dragging magnetometers, sub-bottom profilers. And we're moving into an era now where the big vehicle is being taken place by these small vehicles, these AUVs. You don't have to man them. There's not a crew. It's a battery instead of a tank full of gas. Yeah, you don't have to have all these cables and everything associated. So if you get the AUVs working, it's going to move, especially cultural resource, both discovery and management forward like you wouldn't believe. The depths you can reach are also increased from the hull-mounted systems. So this is a great advance we see in the technology for archaeological use. One of the other things we use is good old-fashioned sonar. A sonar can be attached to anything. People have the idea it's usually in some towed vehicle, or you can attach it to an AOV. You can put it on a tripod and do sector scanner. I'll show some of that. You can stick it on an ROV and look around with it. It's just an acoustic eye that you're looking to map out the seafloor. It's one of the primary methods we've used at this site because it's so large, and it's one of those that we're now trying to bring in other systems to have a more systematic coverage of the area. Our ROV ops, one of the main things for archaeology we have to know, for us it's always important, is where it is. Where did you find it? Exactly where it was. When you're working at 100 meters depth, that becomes a little more difficult. Well, technology, decades ago, and it's getting even better, has made that possible, where we can have beacons, short baseline systems, beacons on the ROV that tell it where it is in relation to the ship. The ship talks to the satellites, so you figure out where the ROV is on the seafloor. Again, you come back to your bathymetric maps, then you're able to pinpoint it exactly on your bathymetric map where you are. So you can go, like these little red pyramids here, go have an amphora placement, and then 3 or 4 years later, you can come right back to that amphora, within a meter of right where it was, and you see it coming right up, which we do it sometimes just to pinch ourselves to make sure we're not imagining that that's happening. But it allows us to do what's hard to do at these depths. On land, you walk around, you put a flag in, you find an amphora sherd. Now, at these depths, we're having to use the ROV and get a beacon signal. But we're able to put together survey maps. We're able to survey the bottom and look and see what kind of material here and make distribution maps. One of the things archaeologists love is putting these maps together to see where the artifacts are. It helps us understand the site formation and what was going on. Here you can see up-to-date one through 2015. I have no idea. I've already predetermined what we're going to find, it appears. But if you draw a square around that, you're going to get a little over 10 square kilometers. So the site is growing. But that's the challenge that we're facing. This is not studying a shipwreck where you have something smaller than this stage area that you're trying to investigate. No, this is getting toward the size of Pompeii now, and it's only growing. And the technology at this depth is what's going to really become important for us to be able to interface with this site and record it properly, understand the artifact distribution and what is happening. How does it relate back to the history? Because we're able to map it so well, then we bring it back to what we're learning. If you look at where the two ideas of where the Roman fleet was, in red, and I happen to think Favignana, and where the Carthaginians, in blue today, were coming to Benagia Bay in order to relieve Hamilcar, our area falls right in where, as a navigator, you would be going on the winds. The winds were usually northwesterly winds, northern winds, and with the square rigs these vessels would have had, this would have made a lot of sense coming through here. So our ability to map the site, to discover the site, to record the site, plays right into tying it back to our 2,000-year-old historical references. So we're able to mesh the two. Looking also at where our remote sensing for the AUV very specifically, one of the great things about this, and there's some technical aspects of it, but it enables you to put multiple systems in the water. The systems have become smaller. So now we don't have to choose if you want to put a side scan or a magnetometer or some sort of multi-beam or bathymetry in the water. The way they design them now, you can pack all these goodies onto the vehicle and send it out and have all the data come back. It's absolutely fantastic. And it's so easy to deploy. You see people leaning over with this one. I can carry this thing around with one hand, the one we used. And students, the software is easy enough to plan missions and work with students learning this in a few hours. Of course, the back end, the processing of the data still takes the technicians to accomplish. And if you see, some of the other great aspects about this is our expansion of our search. We aren't limited anymore. With hull-mounted systems and towed systems, you get into limits, the real size on your vessel, the frequency of the hull-mounted multi-beam, how far is it penetrating into the water. Well, these guys, you take the vehicle right down to the sea floor, so the depth aspect goes out. Excuse me. And the logistical advantages. You can deploy them more easily. You don't have to have a large vessel. You can take the AUVs out and put them in the water off the shore. You can take a small boat out. You can do it on a great day. You don't have to muster the crew and get everybody ready to get out on the sea because it just happened that the weather broke. Very quickly get out, put these in the water. So it helps on a logistical aspect to increase your efficiency in the days that you use for work. The sector scanner I mentioned earlier was another method we deployed, technological method, whereby it's a sonar, and you can see there's a sonar hanging from this tripod. It spins around, records things in high detail, but the area is so small. It doesn't really do a large area, so it's not going to be effective for mapping huge areas, but for individual shipwrecks, fantastic. Photogrammetry sort of goes both ways. You can use AUVs for this or handheld rigs. Great for sites right now. There's a lot of work that's been done on putting these, making 3D photos, basically, at the end of the day with photogrammetry to view sites. We had some AUVs, some experimental AUVs that went in the water 2012 to try to do this for larger areas to search them. But we're still in need of more technological, and it's probably there and I'm not aware of it, to employ the AUVs to go out and do greater areas so we have visual survey. And that's one of the hard things that we're trying to find now when you've got a 10 square kilometer site, to have an AUV that can cover a lot of area very efficiently. 30 by 30 meter squares just aren't going to get it. And of course, you're doing excavation, you're moving sand underwater. We use the ROV for that. The ROV, of course, is your workhorse with the tools, and it comes down with its arms. You put in your squares, you do your digging, pick up artifacts, collect them. You can see in the upper right, placing them into the baskets. It's the same. It's just deeper water variations on what you do on land. And then finally, recording and analysis, and this is still what we get back to, is our primary objectives. The technology helps us in many ways to get the artifacts to us as the researchers, because then we have to study the material culture. And as archaeologists, you're looking at the material culture. As I've been told many times, you have to put your hand on the wood. And this is exactly what you have to do. You can't just look at the amphoras underwater, you have to get them up. You have to look at the material. Now I'll go over some of the material, some of the fun goodies. Here's some of the bronze helmets we've come of this, and this is what we're getting out of this particular site. They're in various stages of cleaning right now. Most are a type called Montefertino, which is a classic helmet in the Mediterranean at this time, used by many, many societies. But you can see PW 1211. Is that a laser? There. Oh, God. I don't know what I've done. There. That's a very different type helmet and appears to be maybe one of our only examples of a true Carthaginian armor at this time that's been discovered. The great thing about this is not a votive context, so we have a lot of information on a very specific time period when this material was used. The amphoras are coming out as well, but we're also getting tableware. We're getting two types of amphoras. Expect the Punic. The Greco-Italic just had some petrology done, found out that the Greco-Italics that we found so far are made, at least ones we tested, were made in Campania, which is Italy, where the Romans were. One of the ones I tested actually had a Punic graffito scratched on it, though. So, and we found it next to one of the rams and next to another Punic. So the interesting part we get into is the wartime economies. We've seen this throughout history. Trade is all doing one thing and people making money on one side. What's going on over here and who's battling who sometimes doesn't match. And this happened exactly with the Carthaginians and the Romans as well. Some of the greatest early archaeologists on this site were the octopuses. And this is where biology folds in to our site. I think everyone here is probably familiar with octopus pots and how you catch an octopus. Well, amphoras are no different. These were deposited over 2,000 years ago. Stoppers pop out as they descend in the differential pressure. And you're left with beautiful octopus pots scattered over this area. And they come in. And what we've found so far, and when I'm looking through these, is the cultural material is in the inner portions, almost a stratigraphy of the amphora. And then as you move out, you get more rocks and the classic shells and whatnot. So all the things that we're finding inside are what they're pulling in. They're pulling in a lot of the cultural material, which was the debris that was coming off the ships falling apart, things falling out of the ships, the armor the people had on, etc. And we're getting everything out of there you can imagine. Warship, we're getting hull attachments. We're getting both copper and iron attachments, all kinds of things coming out, beautiful copper nails, some with wood still hooked to them. Ballast stones. Now, the reason I can put ballast stones more confidently now, when I first saw them, I assumed they looked like ballast stones. They were smooth, they were small, about fist size, maybe a little smaller. Didn't look like the big mafic rocks you see laying around on the seafloor. Had a few of these tested at Barcelona. I have another batch already being tested there, and these all came from Tunisia, basically, Tunisia, Algeria region. So it was exotic stone in a river, formed in a river format, classic what you have as ballast, and what we would expect that would be at the bottom of some of these warships as they sailed. Tableware, tiles, things we didn't expect as much to have on the warships. This is one of the classic things from a historical perspective. Well, you'd never put heavy items on the warship. You wouldn't have any tile structures or whatnot. We're finding them what it means right now. And, there's not enough to say. As we collect more and more material, hopefully we'll be able to answer some of these questions, but the material is there. A look at the rams. Now, I always show this slide. I use it everywhere I lecture, and I think you'll recognize one of them, the real big one there. You can see the rams we're finding are very small. They're much smaller. Got a lot of them, but they're just not as big yet. The athlete ram is by far the largest. The other two, the Bremerhaven and Piraeus, are also quite small and in line with ours. The Aquiladrone is a ram that is very similar in its design to the athlete ram. Also had the wood in it, found in a very similar environment right off the coast of Sicily. Uh-oh, that's not the right thing. Looking at some of the comparative measurements, just one thing, look at weight to the driving center lengths. And the driving center is just this portion here. You can see the athlete ram is just much larger. It's much heavier than these rams. It's on a completely different scale. We do believe that, as you'll see as I progress, it's from a different type of ship. It's a different type than what we're finding. I'm also putting together lots of ram metrics, going through and measuring the rams like a maniac, and was very kindly allowed to do this in the museum yesterday with the athlete ram to take some measurements, which was fantastic. And folding these together, we're able to, looking at parametrics, able just to compare them from a morphological aspect. One of the things archaeologists we love to do is seriate things. You give us 2 or 3 things, we'll make a seriation. And we actually, now that we have more than 2 rams that we know of, we're able to put these together a little more and have an idea of where they came from. So we're starting to see differences. The only problem with this is the latest rams here are probably from a different type of warship. All the ones before that are probably 3s. Some of the things we're finding on the rams, which are just interesting, thought I'd go over, the inscriptions. It's early 3rd century BC Latin, which has a lot of Greek characters in it, and this is some of the only reference material for quaestors and some of the main inscription evidence now for the 3rd century BC we have out of this area. And you can see in 3 of the rams, we have 2 separate quaestors listed here. The order of the names actually flips on one of the rams, so they're placing them on afterwards. It's not a complete unit. The letters are all, characteristics are different, etc. So this is all being formed on in a very craftsman style. And you can see a completely different style of inscription. This was hammered in after the ram was cast. Another quaestor, a single quaestor, was placed on this ram, and 3 rams so far found with this quaestor's name. And then we have one that has a Punic text on it. There's 2 complete different ideas of what the Punic text actually interprets as. Both have a similar idea. With the Romans, classic Roman, you got the administrator's name on there, the state, hello, and then you have the Punic one, which in either connotation, it's entreating a god to help us and to crush the Romans and sink them somehow. So it's a completely different idea. The decorative features are also the same. Now, the decorative features line up with the inscriptions, which would be natural. You see this winged Victoria, which was a very common symbol coming into Rome at this time to symbolize victory. And you see this Montevertino helmet that's on another set of the ones that have the single quaestor listed, which was very typical of this period. And then you can see a list of just what the inscriptions break down as. But what we have is 2 building programs. So we have at least 2 separate building programs for the rams. We have construction marks left on the rams. These are all what we think are the Carthaginian rams, a little more hastily done. We have the wood and attachments all still in place. We know they went down with the wood. The attachments are unbent, untouched. Nothing's happened to them. We have the wood actually still in there. I have wood sitting in labs right now being analyzed. It's not complete, but it's the outside edges of the wood that were preserved from the copper coming in. Thus, we're able to tell something from warship construction. We're able to go back and remember the rams are a cast of the bow. So knowing that, we're able then to reverse engineer the bows, know something about the ships. And if you look at a comparison here of some of the merchant ships we have, large merchant ships, and look at the keel sizes we have for these small little rams that we're finding. So if you do regression lines, we have enough ship knowledge of merchant vessels to understand how long they were compared to their big timbers. We get an idea. Our ships are small. You can see these keel cross-sections up here. We have very, very small vessels, which we think, and we're pretty sure are 3s. They're triremes, if you would. This is a classic one based on, admittedly, and they admitted, Morrison and Coates, no archaeological evidence. This was all iconography and history. This ship could not be this big, the ones we're finding. The 3s we have are much smaller in scale. They just physically could not attain those kind of lengths. So we have 4s and whatnot, are probably the size of what the athlete ram was looking at, and we always believed that was a 4. We're finding much smaller 3s, but this now gets into rowing configurations and how different these are. One of the great things about it, though, is the problem in the Mediterranean has been the ship sheds. These big ships that we've built, like Morrison and Coates' big Olympias, couldn't fit in the ship sheds. They couldn't fit in their own garages. These smaller ships we're finding here at the Agates fit perfectly within them. Battle tactics, the shapes of the rams also speak to the Agate rams' open sea battles versus something like the athlete ram, which is more of a head-on collision design. We find wood trapped inside of the rams in the fins, in the front of the rams, knowing that they smashed into another ship. There's a mortise and tenon trapped in in the wood that's coming out of one of these collisions. So we know they smashed through the vessels and hit them. We have evidence, the shearing evidence of the metal, that they also hit. Some of these hit head-on, and probably in the initial collision. We have some that are dented in a certain way. See here, that matches the central post angle. And you have some that are just sheared off. So we have some damage from both types of attacks. And on the technology on the back end, to conclude, the technology continues. We're looking at the metallurgy. We're modeling them. We're scanning them. And this is an idea of some of the material and some of the ways we can begin to look at our material later on. We're able to scan things now with hand scanners that cost like $300 just right up on the deck. It's fantastic now. Here's a rhino model of the timbers from the athlete ram that a student did at East Carolina because he's able to take the measurements and put these in these CAD programs. Another scan of a helmet, one of the helmets found on the site that's to micromillimetric accuracy that you can measure off of. So the technology on the front end and the technology on the back end are assisting archaeologists greatly now. But the challenges still remain for us. A, because we're archaeologists and we're very challenged as it is with technology. But B, we're still trying to meet our objectives and our standards of archaeology and trying to find the right methodological tools through technology to achieve these. Thank you very much.